Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my channel. Let me ask you something. Have you ever pulled away from a woman, maybe without even meaning to, and suddenly her energy shifts? One day she's warm, laughing at your messages, sharing parts of her day only with you, and the next you stop reaching out and something begins to stir. You might think silence is just silence, but for her, that quiet becomes a mirror. And in that mirror, she starts seeing herself, you, and the relationship in a completely different light. See, when you suddenly stop contacting a woman, whether it's intentional or not, you're not just removing words, you're removing presence, affirmation, and the rhythm she's grown used to. And what happens next depends on far more than you think. Sometimes she'll lean in curious, even a little anxious. Other times she'll pull back in self-protection. And in certain moments, she'll surprise you, showing sides of herself you never saw when you were close. Today we're going to unravel exactly what happens in those silent spaces, because it's in the absence, not the abundance, that the deepest truths between two people often reveal themselves. So let's step into that silence together and see what it really says. When a woman experiences your sudden absence, she doesn't just react to you. She reacts to herself in relation to you. And that distinction is where the entire dance begins. Let's imagine this. You've been texting every day, sharing jokes, little details about your lives. There's this rhythm. You send a message in the morning. She replies with something funny, maybe a picture of her coffee, maybe something about work. You've created a kind of invisible rope between you, and every interaction is another knot holding it together. Then one day you stop pulling that rope. No message, no call. Nope, how's your day? The rope doesn't snap, at least not right away, but she feels it slacken. And in that slackness, 1,000 questions begin to bloom in her mind. It's not always about missing you as a person immediately. It's about missing the certainty of the exchange, the emotional predictability, the feeling of being chosen, of being noticed. Women, like men, are not just in relationships with people. They are in relationships with the meaning those people bring into their lives. Now, here's something most men overlook, that silence you've just created. It's not neutral. It's an active force. You may think you're doing nothing, but from her perspective, it's doing a lot. It's rewriting the script you've been acting out together. And her first instinct, often it's to test the edges of that silence. She might send a small casual message, nothing dramatic. Something like, hey, did you see that post I sent you? Or what's up? These are not just messages. They're little probes checking if the rope is still there. If you respond quickly, warmly, the rope tightens again. The silence becomes a blip, nothing more. But if you don't now, the silence gets teeth. And here's the paradox. Sometimes she'll feel drawn in even more by that space, and sometimes she'll begin to detach. The deciding factor, the history between you and the meaning she assigns to your distance. You see, women read between the lines of absence far more than men realize. If she has felt secure with you, she might interpret your silence as business, stress, or a need for space. She'll wait, watch, maybe even admire the fact that you're not overly available. But if she's ever felt uncertainty with you, if there's been a hint of inconsistency before, her mind won't stop at, has probably busy. It will spiral into something's wrong. Now, I want you to think about how a person's relationship with themselves shows up here. A confident, self-assured woman might acknowledge the silence, feel its sting, but she won't chase endlessly. She'll give you a window, then shift her energy elsewhere. But a woman who feels insecure, who has past wounds around abandonment or rejection, may start moving toward you faster, trying to close the gap. That's why this moment is so telling. It reveals not just how she feels about you, but how she feels about herself. And if you pay attention, you'll see her emotional blueprint unfold right in front of you. But let's not romanticize it. This isn't always some poetic reveal. Sometimes when you stop contacting her, she gets angry. Not the loud, dramatic kind of anger you see in movies, but the quiet, measured anger of someone who feels they're being played with. She may mirror your distance. She may cut the rope entirely. And here's where it gets interesting. If you've been the pursuer for most of your dynamic, your silence can shift the balance entirely. Suddenly, she's the one wondering. She's the one playing out conversations in her head, imagining what she might say if you reach out again. This role reversal can ignite attraction for some women, and for others, it's a turn-off they'll never recover from. What determines which one it will be? The story she's telling herself about why you're silent. If she believes your distance is about your own life, your growth, your focus, your priorities, there's room for intrigue, even respect. But if she suspects it's manipulation, a tactic to make her chase, or a punishment for something she did, the silence becomes a wall she refuses to climb. Think about the power in that. Without saying a word, you can shift the emotional climate of the entire connection. But that power is not without consequence. The question is, are you aware of the kind of silence you're creating? Is it the kind that invites curiosity, or the kind that breeds resentment? Because make no mistake, silence speaks. And when it comes from someone who's been part of your daily emotional diet, it's like suddenly cutting out sugar. The body doesn't just shrug, it reacts, it craves, it protests, it rebalances. And sometimes it finds a new source altogether. Now, in these early days of your absence, She's not just responding to you, she's deciding what story she's going to tell herself about you from this point forward. She's deciding whether you are the man who can hold his ground with dignity or the man who plays games to get a reaction, whether you're someone she misses in a way that deepens connection or someone she begins to mistrust. And this is where many men make the fatal mistake of breaking the silence too soon or in the wrong way. They see her starting to pull back, they panic, they rush in with explanations, apologies, reassurances. But by doing so, they interrupt the very process that would have revealed her true feelings. They never get to see who she becomes when the rope goes slack. So, if you truly want to understand her and yourself in this dynamic, you have to let the silence breathe. Not to punish, not to control, but to observe, to allow space for what is unspoken to rise to the surface. And when you do, you'll start to notice the subtle shifts, the tone of her messages, the timing, the way she talks about her day, whether she shares small, intimate details or keeps everything surface level. These shifts are like signposts telling you where her mind is going, how her heart is moving. Some men fear this process because they think, what if she forgets about me? But let me tell you, if silence makes her forget, she was never truly anchored to begin with. When the rope between you slackens, something fascinating happens inside her mind. It doesn't leave that space empty. The human brain is allergic to ambiguity. When there's a gap in information, it rushes to fill it with a story. And the story she writes will tell you everything you need to know about your connection, her past, and the lens through which she sees relationships. For some women, the first story is self-blame. They begin scanning their recent interactions with you like an investigator combing through security footage. Did I say something wrong? Was I too needy? Maybe I shouldn't have told him that. This isn't just about you. It's about every moment in her life where someone's affection felt uncertain. You've triggered an old file in her memory. The content of that file, what's written in it, depends on her personal history. For others, the story is not, what did I do wrong? But, what's wrong with him? They'll start looking for cracks in your character. They'll replay your words, your body language, your past actions, and build a theory. And theories have power, because once a person believes they know why you've gone silent, they'll respond not to what's real, but to what they've imagined. Here's where it gets dangerous for a lot of men. They underestimate how quickly perception becomes reality. If she decides your silence is arrogance, emotional immaturity, or disinterest, she will treat you accordingly, even if none of that is true. And if she decides your silence is strength, self-respect, or depth, she will lean into that energy with more curiosity. But perception doesn't only shape the way she feels about you, it shapes the way she behaves towards you. This is when you might see her do one of three things. The first is the reach. She sends a light-hearted message. She tags you in a meme. She responds to an old conversation. This is her way of gently shaking the tree to see if fruit falls. It's not confrontation. It's invitation. The second is the mirror. She stops reaching out, stops initiating, and matches your absence. This isn't always anger. It can be self-protection. She's telling herself, if he's not prioritizing me, I'm not going to put myself in a position to be hurt. And the third is the pivot. This is when she starts investing her energy elsewhere, friends, hobbies, other men, not necessarily as a way to get back at you, but as a way to re-anchor her identity outside of your connection. Which one she chooses often depends on two things: how secure she feels in your bond, and how secure she feels in herself. That's why the silence reveals so much. It's not just testing her feelings for you, it's showing you her relationship with her own emotional needs. Now, I want you to picture this from her point of view. Imagine she wakes up, reaches for her phone out of habit, and there's no message from you. She notices, but she doesn't panic. Then hours pass. She tells herself, you're busy, you'll get in touch later. But as the day stretches on, she starts to feel the absence in her body, not as a physical ache, though for some it can be that, but as an unease, a tension, a low hum of uncertainty. It's not about the message itself, it's about what the message symbolizes. Contact means connection. Silence means, well, that's where the story begins. And here's something a lot of men misunderstand. When you stop contacting her, it doesn't automatically make her miss you in a romantic, I want him back way. Sometimes it makes her miss the feeling of being attended to. And that feeling can be replaced by someone else entirely. This is why intentionality is crucial. If you are creating this silence to punish, to provoke, or to manipulate, you are gambling with trust. And trust, once broken, doesn't heal just because you start talking again. But if your silence is simply you living your life, maintaining your self-respect and not chasing, then the kind of woman who values that will feel drawn in, not pushed away. Now, as the days pass, her coping mechanisms kick in. She might post more on social media, not necessarily to get your attention, but because humans often seek validation in one place when it's been withdrawn from another. She might become more engaged with friends, suddenly busy with events or activities she wasn't mentioning before. Or she might retreat inward, becoming quieter, as if holding her cards closer to her chest. If you're watching closely, you'll notice these shifts are rarely random. They're her way of recalibrating her emotional balance. And the way she recalibrates is an insight into how she navigates intimacy. Some women lean into vulnerability. They'll reach out directly and say, "I haven't heard from you. Is everything okay?" This requires emotional courage, and when a woman communicates like this, she's not playing games. She's giving you the chance to meet her in honesty. Others lean into performance. They'll pretend they haven't noticed, act unbothered, maybe even amplify their independence. This isn't always genuine. It's a shield. And if you take it at face value, you might miss the fact that beneath that shield, she's wondering why you've stepped back. And some will lean into withdrawal. They'll quietly start detaching, not as a punishment, but as a way of preserving self-worth. They decide, if he's not choosing me, I'll remove myself before I feel rejected. These women often don't announce their departure. You just realize one day that the thread has gone cold. This is the silent crossroad your absence creates. And the truth is, once she chooses a path, it's hard to redirect it. That's why the days right after your silence begins are so pivotal. They're the period where meaning is assigned, where stories are written, and where emotional momentum is built. For you, this might just be space, a pause, a busy week at work. For her, it's an emotional event, and whether it becomes an opportunity for deeper connection or the start of a slow fade depends on the combination of her inner wiring and your next move. If you understand this, you stop seeing her reactions as random. You start seeing them as part of a pattern she's probably played out in other relationships, one that has roots in her earliest experiences of attachment. And this is where silence becomes more than a tactic. It becomes a mirror for the kind of connection you're really building. There's a moment, and it often comes quietly, when your absence stops feeling like just a break in communication and starts becoming something else entirely. It becomes a mirror that reflects not just you, but her, and everything she believes about herself in love. You see, in the beginning, she's simply reacting to what's happening now. She's wondering why you haven't called, trying to interpret your intentions. But over time, that wondering begins to tap into something older than you, older than this connection. It reaches into the stored memories of every time she has felt desired and every time she has felt overlooked. This is where you start to see her real attachment style show itself. If she has an anxious style, the silence can feel almost unbearable. It's not just that she misses you. She feels a drop in her own sense of security. The absence becomes proof in her mind that she is somehow less valuable, less wanted. And the anxious energy this creates can lead her to chase, to over-explain, to try to win your attention back. If she has an avoidance style, the silence may actually feel like relief at first. It removes the pressure of intimacy. But as the days pass, she might start to notice a hollowness, a lack of emotional stimulation. She may begin to miss you in a way that surprises her, but she will rarely show it directly. And if she's secure, she will notice the silence, acknowledge it, and allow herself to stay grounded in her own worth. She may give you space while remaining open, but she won't step into chasing. She'll simply observe whether your absence is a healthy pause or the beginning of disconnection. Now, here's the subtle truth most men overlook in this stage. The silence is no longer about what you're doing. It's about how she's perceiving herself in the space you've created. Does she feel like a woman worth pursuing, or does she feel like a placeholder in your life? That distinction can change the entire trajectory of attraction. This is also the stage where a lot of women will test you. Not out of spite, but to regain a sense of control. She might post something that she knows will catch your eye. She might suddenly seem very visible socially, engaging with other men online, being more playful in her public presence. These aren't always signs that she's moved on. Sometimes they're ways of saying, I'm still here, but I'm not waiting. And you have to understand, these moves aren't always conscious. Often they're instinctive, a kind of emotional survival strategy. But here's the thing, the way you respond or don't in this stage matters more than anything you've done so far, because if your absence has stirred her curiosity, your next contact can create a rush of renewed attraction. But if your absence has confirmed her fears, your return might be met with coolness, guardedness, or even polite distance. I want you to imagine a woman sitting alone at night, maybe with a glass of wine, scrolling through your old conversations. She's smiling at some messages, frowning at others, wondering if she misread you all along. This moment, this private space where no one is watching, is where she decides whether she will emotionally reopen the door for you or quietly close it. And what influences that decision is not just the silence itself, but the quality of the connection that existed before it. If you were deeply present, if your attention felt authentic and consistent, she is far more likely to interpret the silence as situational, something that can be bridged. But if your presence was already inconsistent, she will likely interpret it as a pattern, and she will start emotionally protecting herself against you. Now, let's talk about something raw, attraction. Because yes, silence can intensify attraction, but only under specific conditions. When a woman feels that your distance comes from confidence, purpose, and a full life, not from coldness or resentment, it can spark something primal. It can make her lean in, wonder more, fantasize even. The mystery isn't about games. It's about the fact that your world doesn't revolve around her. But here's the razor's edge. If she perceives your distance as indifference, as a withdrawal of affection, it doesn't create attraction, it creates self-preservation. And self-preservation kills romantic energy. This is why the silence between you isn't just a blank space, it's a pressure chamber. And under pressure, the truth of the connection is revealed. For both of you. Because let's be honest, the silence is also doing something to you. You're watching, you're wondering, you're maybe fighting the urge to break it. You're seeing how she behaves without your presence in her daily life. And this is valuable, because you get to see her not as the idealized version of her that shows up when everything is smooth, but as the real woman who reacts under uncertainty. Some men don't want to see this truth. They'd rather rush back in and keep the illusion alive. But the men who can sit with it, who can watch without panicking, who can stay anchored in their own value, they're the ones who truly understand the power of emotional pacing. And here's a paradox worth remembering sometimes. The silence doesn't push her away or pull her closer. It simply clears the space for her to decide. And whatever she decides, it will be more authentic than anything you could have coaxed out of her with constant contact. This is why I always say silence is not absence. It's presence in another form. It's you saying, I am here, but I am not chasing. I am available, but I am not desperate. I am interested, but I am whole without you. If that's the energy behind your silence, it doesn't matter whether she reaches back or not, because the person you've become in holding it will always serve you in love. There comes a moment, and you rarely see it happen in real time, when the scales inside her tip. Up until now, she's been balancing between two realities, the one where she believes this is just a pause, and the one where she accepts that maybe you're already gone. That tipping point is delicate. Sometimes it happens suddenly. One small thing pushes her over. Other times it happens gradually, so subtly she doesn't even realize she's chosen until she's already walking in that direction. If she tips toward reconnection, you'll feel it in the way she reopens the door. She might reach out with something warm, familiar, an inside joke. She may drop her guard just enough to let you know she's missed your presence, without explicitly saying the words. And here's where many men misread the moment, thinking that her softness means the silence has worked as a tactic. But it's not a tactic success, it's a relationship's resilience showing itself. If she tips toward detachment, you'll notice her tone cool. She becomes polite instead of playful. Conversations feel transactional. She might still respond to you, but it's like she's already moved her emotional furniture out of the room. You can still visit, but it's no longer her home. The danger is that once she's tipped toward detachment, trying to drag her back across that emotional divide can feel to her like manipulation. It confirms her decision to protect herself. That's why paying attention in these early signals matters. The tone of her voice, the timing of her replies, the way she shares or stops sharing parts of her life. And here's something to understand deeply. By the time you feel her pulling away, she has already been pulling away in her mind for days, maybe weeks. Women rarely announce the moment they emotionally exit. They simply start investing less. Now, some of you might ask, why does she let herself drift if she still cares? And the answer is simple but not easy: self-preservation. The silence forces her to face the possibility that your presence is conditional, that your interest is fragile. And for many women, the cost of staying emotionally open in that uncertainty feels too high. So they close the door not because they want to, but because it feels safer than standing in the hallway waiting for you to knock. But for others, and this is where it gets interesting, the silence stirs something different. Instead of closing the door, they become curious. They wonder why you've stepped back, what you're doing, who you're with. This curiosity can create a renewed pull toward you, especially if your absence is paired with signals that your life is full, engaged, and purposeful. It's important to note that this pull is not the same as manipulation. Manipulation plays with her insecurities. Healthy intrigue plays with her sense of mystery and respect for your independence. And there is a world of difference between the two. If you handle this stage well, meaning you stay grounded, you don't send mixed signals, you don't come rushing back with explanations that sound defensive, you give her the opportunity to approach you on her own terms. And when she does, it's far more powerful than anything you could have forced through constant pursuit. Now, let's talk about what happens when she reaches out after a silence. If her tone is warm, open, and familiar, this is your moment to meet her with equal warmth. No accusations. No, why didn't you text me first? Simply pick up the thread as if you've both been living your lives fully, and now the timing feels right again. That ease is what makes the reconnection stick. If her tone is guarded, short, or cool, pushing harder will only reinforce the wall. In this case, the best thing you can do is respond with calm confidence, not neediness. Give her space to feel safe enough to soften again, or to walk away without drama if that's where she's headed. Because here's the truth, not every silence is meant to be bridged. Sometimes, it reveals that the connection was built on constant reassurance rather than genuine emotional alignment. And when that's the case, the silence is not the problem, it's the teacher. But when the connection is real, when there's a foundation of trust and attraction, the silence can actually deepen the bond. It allows both people to return to each other not out of habit, but out of choice. And choice is the oxygen of long-term desire. Think about this. When you first met, there was a gap between you. A space filled with curiosity, wonder, the thrill of discovering each other. Over time, that space often collapses under constant contact. Silence, when handled well, reintroduces a little bit of that gap. It lets desire breathe again. The problem is that most people are afraid of that gap. They confuse space with loss, quiet with rejection. But for a woman who values depth, space can be a reminder that you are a man with a life, a man she chooses to meet in the middle, not a man who camps at her doorstep waiting for her attention. At this turning point, her decision is not just about whether she wants you in her life. It's about how she wants you in her life. As a man she respects and desires, or as a man she keeps at the edges because she doesn't trust the consistency of his presence. And your role here is not to convince her. Your role is to embody the truth of who you are, so that whatever decision she makes is a response to authenticity, not performance. Because when you try to win her back with tactics, you might get her attention, but you won't get her trust. And trust is the one thing that makes any reconnection worth having. By now, you've probably noticed something. The silence between you wasn't really about the absence of words. It was about what rose to the surface when those words stopped. It was about what she felt, how she responded, and how you held your ground without losing yourself. You've seen how, in the early days, she tested the edges of that space, how her mind built stories, how her emotions reached or retreated. You've seen the way her tone, her timing, her presence shifted. And at the turning point, you felt her either lean in or step back. Now comes the question every man secretly asks himself when he's been in this place: what do I do now? The answer, if you've been listening closely, isn't about chasing or waiting. It's about choosing, consciously, intentionally, whether this connection is still worth investing in, based on what you've learned in the quiet. If the silence revealed that she values you, that she respects your independence, that she can stay grounded without constant validation, that's a woman you can build with. In that case, your next step is simple. Reopen the channel with warmth and sincerity. Let the reconnection feel natural, not forced. Let it be the continuation of a story, not the patching up of a crack. You might say something light, something human, that acknowledges the time without making it a point of tension. A simple, "Hey, I was thinking about you," can carry more weight than a long explanation. Because when trust is intact, you don't need to overcompensate. If the silence revealed cracks, if it showed you that she spirals into games, uses your absence as an excuse to punish, or retreats so far you can't feel her presence anymore, you have your answer too. You don't need to fight for someone who closes the door every time there's a draft. This is where a lot of men struggle. They want the answer to be about getting her back, when sometimes the answer is about letting her go. And letting go isn't failure, it's clarity. Because relationships are not measured in how close you can stand when everything is easy. They're measured in how well the connection holds when space enters the room. And if space turns you into strangers, then closeness was never as solid as it seemed. So what does this mean for you moving forward? It means you don't fear the quiet anymore. You don't see it as a void you have to fill at all costs. You see it as a test. Not of her loyalty to you, but of her loyalty to herself and to the truth of what you've built together. And it means you start valuing yourself in the same way. You stop performing for connection. You stop sending messages just to check if you still matter. You become the man who can hold his presence without constant confirmation. Because the men who thrive in love are not the ones who keep a woman's attention every second. They're the ones who make her want to return, not because she has to, not because she's afraid to lose you, but because she feels something real when she's with you, and she doesn't want to lose that. Now, there's one more thing I want you to understand. Silence doesn't just reveal the other person. It reveals you. In the quiet, you hear your own fears. The voice that says, if I don't reach out, she'll forget me. Or the one that says, maybe I'm not enough. And if you're willing to face those voices, instead of silencing them with constant contact, you grow. You stop letting insecurity dictate your moves. And here's the beauty. When you stop fearing the quiet, you start communicating from a place of choice, not desperation. You can reach out because you want to, not because you're terrified of what might happen if you don't. A woman feels that difference instantly. She feels when a message is rooted in self-possession versus when it's sent to close an uncomfortable gap, and she will always respond more openly to the man who is at peace with himself. So, if you've been in that space where the messages have stopped, the calls have gone quiet, and the rope between you is loose, Don't just focus on what she's doing. Focus on what you're learning. Ask yourself, do I like who I am in this silence? Do I respect the way I'm showing up? Am I being the kind of man who can hold space without collapsing into neediness or coldness? Because at the end of the day, the right woman won't just come back because you reached out. She'll come back because the space reminded her of your value. And the wrong woman, she'll use the space as her exit. And that's a gift too. It saves you from years of pouring into something that was never meant to hold water. So let the silence do its work. Let it be the filter that separates connection from convenience. And when you step back into her life or choose to walk forward without her, do it with the quiet confidence of a man who knows that love worth having will survive the sound of nothing at all. And maybe that's the whole point. Love isn't proven in the endless talking. It's proven in who still chooses to stand with you when the talking stops. So if you're listening to this now, sitting in your own silence, wondering if she's thinking about you, know this, she is. But what she's thinking will be shaped by the man you choose to be in this moment. Choose well.